Good morning, representatives, and welcome to the 27th day of the session, February the 20th, 2025, the Wyoming 68th Legislature. We need to get business underway, so Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Convening roll call for the 27th day, Thursday, February 20th, 2025. Allemand. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. Bratton. Brown Gary. Brown Landon. Byron. Campbell Elisa. Campbell Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Filer. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins. Excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Wharf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker.
Here.
Bratton. 61 present, 1 excused.
Members, our prayer today will be led by our very own Representative Erickson. So if you'll please rise, he will lead us in prayer.
Our Father in heaven, as we come before thee this day, at this great time in our lives, we wish to give thee thanks for the many blessings that we have. We're so grateful for the opportunity that we have to be here and to be serving thy people and this state. We would ask for blessings to be with us throughout this day and through the rest of the session, that we may be found being humble and teachable and willing to accept thy will thou hast for us and for this state. Help us to be mindful of those that are around us and that are less fortunate than us. We ask thee to also be with those that are mourning at this time and maybe struggling with the recent string of events in our state and in our communities. We would ask for thy comfort to be with them and help them in any way that thou seest fit. We would ask for blessings to be upon our families and again our communities, and as we are away, that they may be taken care of and guided and directed. Again, we love thee and thank thee for all that we have, and say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Erickson. Fellow members and guests, please join me in the salute to our flag. Ladies and gentlemen, let's find our seats and get ready to go. Concurrence request. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 19th, 2025 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representatives Jarvis and Posey.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. No messages from the Senate, unfinished business. We're going to go into some enrolled acts here, ladies and gentlemen, this morning. There's some stuff that we could have done last night, but it was getting late, so we're going to go ahead and do that this morning. Yes, we have a couple of those here, but that's just like giving you a heads up. We're going into enrolled acts next. So we've got some privileges of the floor. Representative Kelly, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor, please.
Please, go ahead.
It's always a wonderful day when I get to start my day out seeing a lovely, tall woman with purple hair. So say hello to my wife up in the gallery. And I'd also like to introduce, I've got my 6-foot little girl up there, Rachel. The one with the gorgeous blonde hair is my son, Quinn, who I warned not to grow till he could grow a beard, but he didn't listen. And Kane Kelly, please stand up and wave to everyone.
You are truly blessed, Representative Kelly. What a beautiful family. How fantastic. And welcome to the House. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad to have you here. Boy, I tell you, I don't know if y'all heard that, but that ought to make you melt. How sweet. What a dear person. Dear, 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 dear person. All right. Representative Thayer, please.
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
By all means, proceed.
We are so honored today to have 2025 leadership class of Carbon County braving the roads and coming down. We've got them in the West Gallery if they'd like to stand up, here to do and watch us do some of our good work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, welcome to the House, Carbon County. Glad to have you. Please enjoy. Other members, Representative Filer, you have something for us? We may have to do a roll call vote on these. Keep them good. Keep them good.
Mr. Speaker, may I have two privileges?
Two?
Two different items, sir.
Please, go ahead.
Okay.
Do that.
All right, folks, so before we can boo my jokes, all right, but what I would like to do is we're excited to have Leadership Cheyenne class, the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce with us today. These future leaders are here to get a firsthand look at how the legislative process works, part of their legislative class day. Their visit shows their dedication to getting involved and making our community better. Let's give the warm welcome to the Leadership Cheyenne class over here in the South Gallery.
Welcome to the House. Thanks for being here. Now, for your second act.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hey, this is a good one. Yeah, you're booing me already. Okay, that's good. Good start of the day. All right. All right. Let's see. You guys got my joke yesterday. Let's see if y'all get this one. Why do seagulls fly over the ocean? Ha, got you. Huh. Because if they flew over the bay, they'd be called bagels.
That was actually quite funny. Very good. Very good. All right. Any other announcements? Any other privileges? Seeing none. Okay, we will continue on then. All right. Enrolled acts. We are at that order of business of signing of enrolled acts. Let me get my First Enrolled Act for our consideration, Enrolled Act number 13. Reading clerk.
House Enrolled Act 13, being original House Bill 4, an act relating to motor vehicles, increasing annual registration fees for resident snowmobiles, increasing non-resident annual snowmobile user fees, creating a permanent registration for antique snowmobiles, providing definitions, making conforming amendments, requiring rulemaking, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Enrolled Act number 13, being original House Bill number 4. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, Enrolled Act number 14.
House Enrolled Act 14, being original House Bill 23, an act relating to motor vehicles, repealing requirements to physically surrender a driver's license, repealing temporary licenses, requiring peace officers to submit signed statements to the Department of Transportation after alcohol concentration tests for persons under 21 years of age as specified, clarifying the timeline for contested case hearings as specified, repealing obsolete provisions, making conforming amendments, providing rulemaking authority, and providing for an effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 14, having been original House Bill 23. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, number 15.
House Enrolled Act 15, being original House Bill 45, an act relating to game and fish, removing otters from the definition of protected animals for purposes of hunting regulations, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Enrolled Act number 15, having been original Bill 45. I have so signed. Congratulations, Representative Byron. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, number 16.
House Enrolled Act 16, being original House Bill 54, an act relating to courts, authorizing the assignment of cases and proceedings from circuit courts and district courts to chancery court judges, specifying requirements for transfers, authorizing retired chancery court judges to provide judicial service as specified, making conforming amendments and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Enrolled Act number 16, having been original House Bill number 54. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, number 17.
House Enrolled Act 17, being original House Bill 86, an act relating to public property and buildings, amending and creating provisions relating to budgeting, planning, and reporting for capital construction projects, major maintenance and routine maintenance for public buildings, facilities, and sites, conforming and repealing definitions, amending requirements for contracting for public works, specifying duties related to capital construction projects, major maintenance and routine maintenance for the State Construction Department, the State Building Commission, the school districts, the Board of Trustees of the University of Wyoming, and the Community College Commission, repealing major maintenance funding requirements, requiring reports, requiring rulemaking, specifying applicability, and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 17, being original House Bill number 86. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration will be Senate file or Senate Enrolled Act number 1.
What is he?
Number 1.
Enrolled Joint Resolution 1, being original Joint Resolution 3, a joint resolution commemorating the 100th anniversary of Nellie Taylor Ross becoming the first woman to hold the office of governor in the United States. Whereas Nellie Taylor Ross was born on November 29, 1876 in St. Joseph, Missouri. And whereas after being raised in the Great Plains of the Midwest, Nellie Taylor Ross came to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and married William B. Ross, a lawyer and inspiring politician. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross was described as gracious, funny, smart, and strongly loyal to her friends and family. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross became the First Lady of Wyoming in 1922 after her husband, William B. Ross, was elected governor. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross was relied upon by her husband, who consulted her daily on political life. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross was asked to run for governor by the state party chairman after Governor William B. Ross died October 2nd, 1924. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross, who had political ambitions, was advised not to run for the office of governor by friends and family, but nonetheless accepted her party's nomination on October 14th, 1924. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross won the special election for governor on November 4th, 1924 with 55 12% of the votes. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross assumed office as the first woman governor of the United States on January 5th, 1925, tackling hardships throughout the state, including drought, farm, ranch failures, and bank failures. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross served as governor for one term, but her remarkable political career did not end once she left the governor's office. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross once again made history in May 1933 when she became the first woman to hold the position of Director of the United States Mint. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross served as Director of the United States Mint through the Great Depression, World War II, and the Korean War, and is the longest-serving United States Mint Director in history. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross retired from the United States Mint in April 1953 and lived a prosperous life until her death at age 100 on December 20th, 1977. And whereas Nellie Taylor Ross remained the only woman to have served as governor of Wyoming and one of 7 women to serve as director of the United States Mint. And whereas Wyoming is the equality state and has been home to many historical achievements by women, and whereas Nellie Taylor Ross continues to be an inspiration to many people across Wyoming and the United States. And whereas January 5th, 2025 marked the 100th anniversary of Nellie Taylor Ross' historical inauguration.
I am now to sign enrolled Senate Joint Resolution Number 1, being original Senate Joint Resolution 3. I have so signed. Next, Senate Enrolled Act Number 7.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 7 being original Senate File 42. An act relating to alcoholic beverages, authorizing resort hotel liquor licenses, specifying requirements for the resort hotel liquor license and licensees, making conforming amendments, providing and amending definitions, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act or Senate Enrolled Act Number 7, having been original Senate File Number 42. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, Senate Enrolled Act Number 8.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 8 being original Senate File 49. An act relating to ad valorem taxation, requiring tangible personal property to be valued using valuation indexes and depreciation schedules as specified, requiring rulemaking and providing for effective dates, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act Number 8, having been original Senate File Number 49. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act 9.
Senate Enrolled Act 9 being original Senate File 13. An act relating to reading assessment and intervention, eliminating the permissive use of group reading plans and individualized reading plans, modifying the requirements for school and district improvement plans, amending requirements for screening students for signs of reading difficulties, amending requirements for individualized reading plans, amending school district reporting requirements, making conforming amendments, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act Number 9, being original Senate File Number 13. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act Number 10.
Senate Enrolled Act 10, being original Senate File 78, an act relating to elections, prohibiting a person from distributing unsolicited absentee ballot application forms to any qualified elector as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 10, having been original Senate File number 78. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act number 11.
Senate Enrolled Act Number 11, being original Senate File 80, an act relating to water, amending the conditions under which abandonment of water rights applies as specified, requiring rulemaking and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 11, being original Senate File 80. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, number 12.
Senate Enrolled Act 12, being original Senate File 131, an act relating to K through 12 school facilities, repealing the requirement for charter schools to receive reimbursement for leasing expenses if the state construction department determines there are no existing adequate educational facilities within the school district, making conforming amendments and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 12, having been original Senate File number 131. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, Senate Enrolled Act number 13.
Senate Enrolled Act 13, being original Senate File 96, an act relating to the Wyoming Legal Tender Act, requiring the state treasurer to hold and invest specie and specie legal tender, authorizing the state treasurer to hire consultants, requiring a study and report, and providing for effective dates, be enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 13, having been Senate File originally number 96. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, number 14.
Senate Enrolled Act 14, being original Senate File 73, an act relating to charter schools, allocating school district central office non-personnel expenses to charter schools as specified, allocating school district central office personnel to charter schools on a proportional basis as specified, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign Enrolled Act number 14, being original Senate File number 73. I have so signed. Next Enrolled Act for our consideration, number 15.
Senate Enrolled Act 15, being original Senate File 81, an act relating to taxation and revenue, creating a property tax exemption for property owned by the state, clarifying the taxability of state-owned lands, specifying applicability, providing a sunset date, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I am about to sign Senate Enrolled Act number 15, being original Senate File number 81. I have so signed. That completes our Enrolled Acts for this morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have one concurrence here. You got that one? Let me see. Chairman Washut, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move message number 308 and ask the body to concur with the changes made by the body down the hall. A very simple change, just striking some additional language on page 2, line 6 that said, for items furnished or services rendered. Strike that information, just put a period. Accomplishes the exact same purpose, and the sponsor of the bill concurs and asks for your concurrence. Please vote aye.
Any discussion? No discussion? Okay, we are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 166. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemande. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. Bratton. Brown Gary. Brown Landon. Byron. Campbell Elisa. Campbell Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Feiler. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storr. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker. Are there any changes? Harshman, excused to aye. Angelos, excused to aye. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 166. Representative Harshman, please.
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor, please.
Please proceed.
Members, if you would stand up and join me in a warm welcome. Today, we have some fifth grade visitors from Casper. Casper is, of course, in Natrona County, #1 on our license plates. And these kids are #1 in our heart. They're from Fort Casper Academy, and there's going to be 3 groups coming through today. They rode the school bus down this morning. And this is Miss Nelson's class. Wave, thank you. Hey, welcome to the house, kids. Glad you're here.
Representative Harshman, and welcome young people to the House. How were the roads? Good? Perfect. Get home safely and enjoy the day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, teachers, for bringing them down here and helping them engage in the process and see how this works. And hopefully they'll want to be involved in this one day too, we trust. Representative Brown, please.
Mr. Speaker, privilege of the floor.
By all means, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, you welcomed half of the class of Leadership Wyoming. The other half of the class was down at the other end of the hall watching the older body take a nap just a little bit ago. So if we could stand and just recognize the other half of Leadership Cheyenne and give them a warm welcome to the House.
Welcome to the House. And which one of you is Colton Carlson? Could you please stand? Wave at your mother, right there. There you go. Thanks for being in the House. And Colton, you did a really good job with her. We appreciate all your efforts with her. So she's awesome. I appreciate her very much. So thank you for being in the House. All right, ladies and gentlemen, moving on. We will go to introductions, Senate files. I can find it in my list of cool tabs. Here we go. We are at that order of business of Senate files on first reading. The first Senate file for our consideration is Senate File 160.
Senate File 160, sponsored by Senator Olson.
First reading of the bill.
Treatment Courts Amendments 2.
Senate File 160 will be assigned to our committee number 1, Judiciary. Next Senate file for our consideration will be Senate File 22.
Senate File 22, sponsored by Senator Schuler.
First reading of the bill.
Ground for termination of parental rights guardianship.
Senate File 22 will be assigned to our committee number 1, Judiciary. Next Senate file for our consideration will be Senate File 71.
Senate File 71, sponsored by Senator Brennan.
First reading of the bill.
Ignition interlocked restricted license aggravated homicide.
Senate File 71 will be assigned to also our committee number 1, Judiciary. Next Senate file for our consideration, Senate File 57.
Senate File 57, sponsored by corporations.
First reading of the bill.
911 servicing reporting.
Senate File 57 will be assigned to our committee number 7, Corporations. Next, Senate Joint Resolution number 7 will be considered.
Senate Joint Resolution 7, sponsored by Senator Pappas.
First reading of the resolution.
NCSL 50th anniversary.
Senate Joint Resolution number 7 will be assigned to our committee number 8, Transportation. Next Senate file for our consideration, Senate File 24.
Senate File 24, sponsored by Senator Barlow.
First reading of the bill.
Special license plates for multi-purpose vehicles.
Senate File 24 will also be assigned to our committee number 8, Transportation. Next Senate file for our consideration, Senate File 28.
Senate File 28, sponsored by Transportation.
First reading of the bill.
ROTC Endowment Program.
Senate File 28 will be assigned to our committee number 8, Transportation. Next Senate file for our consideration will be Senate File 144.
Senate File 144, sponsored by Senator Driscoll.
First reading of the bill.
Wyoming Ireland Trade Commission.
Senate File 144 will be assigned to our committee number 9, Minerals. Next Senate file for our consideration, Senate File 157.
Senate File 157, sponsored by Senator Olson.
First reading of the bill.
Department of Family Services Confidentiality Amendments 2.
Senate File 157 will be assigned to our committee number 10, Labor. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be going to our bills on third reading and final passage. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
The consent list changes often. I had to make sure what it was. Members, I move third reading consent list consisting of the following 4 bills: Senate File 32, 33, 88, and 120.
Does any member want to remove one of those bills from the consent list? Representative Nicholas. Please.
I'm asked to remove Senate File 33. There will be amendments to that.
Okay. Senate File 33 is removed. Any other members would like to remove a bill from the consent list? We have 32, 88, and 120 left. Seeing none, Chief Clerk. Oh, you got to read them then, that's right. Reading Clerk, please.
Senate File 32, sponsored by Transportation. Unpaved roads, speed limits, amendments. An act relating to speed limits, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 88, sponsored by Natural Resource Funding. 2025 Large Project Funding. An act relating to the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resource Funding Act being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. Senate File 120, sponsored by Senator Salazar. Wyoming Prime Act. An act relating to marketing homemade foods being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall these bills pass the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown Gary? Brown Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Campbell Kevin? Chestick? Clauston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Feiler. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker. Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 61 aye, 1 excused. As for Senate File 32, are there any changes? Andrew, aye to no. Smith, aye to no. Lucas, aye to no. Johnson, aye to no. Singh, aye to no. Allemand, aye to no. Weber, aye to no. Further changes. Guggenmoss, aye to no. Further changes. Heft, aye to no. Lean, aye to no. Brown, Gary, aye to no. Winter, aye to no. Brady, aye to no. Further changes. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 48 aye, 13 no, 1 excused. As for Senate File 88, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Stivar, aye to no. Further changes. Johnson, aye to no. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 59 aye, 2 no, 1 excused. As for Senate File 120, are there any changes? Campbell Elisa, aye to no. Provenza, aye to no. Sherwood, aye to no. Chestick, aye to no. Further changes. Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 57 aye, 4 no, 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 32, 88, and 120 have passed the House. Moving on to third reading regular. We are at that order of business of bills on third reading and final passage. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 48.
Senate File 48, sponsored by Revenue. Business Property Exemption, an act relating to taxation and revenue being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Sherwood, First Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, body. I will move the third reading amendment, number 1, to Senate File 48 and ask for your favorable consideration. But I want to thank the Chairman of Revenue for working with me on this. He was very patient with me as we worked through my concerns and then reached out across the floor. So thank you very much for that. So currently, the current language in the bill applies to any person, meaning any business or natural person, and it provides up to $50,000 in personal property exemption filed in each county. My concern is that there is a way to game this system. And if you guys know me, you know that I usually don't default to someone doing something bad. I'm very much an optimist and think the best of everyone. So this came to me, it was a concern, and so we wanted to spend some time with our department and see if there was a way to address this concern, that somebody could create a series of individual business LLCs and file multiple claims. So if somebody has 150,000 in property assets, they could do one report for 50, another bucket and another report for another 50, and so on, and end up paying nothing in property, their business property taxes. So yes, there's paperwork behind it, but that loophole exists, and we confirm that that loophole currently exists with the department that oversees our revenues. In addition, because this is a self-reporting process, so I go in and I fill out my paperwork, you don't even have to file an LLC. You just have to change the name on the form. So I could put my name, my spouse's name, and my child's name on it and divide up that 50,000 into separate buckets and not pay anything. So I was like, well, that's not ideal. That's not the intent. That's not the intent of what we're trying to do with this piece of legislation. So I worked with the good chairman of Revenue to draft an amendment that we hope closes this loophole and closes this concern. So the amendment that I'm bringing to you states that it's property owned by and subject to the control of the property owner. So all of the property under the control of one owner in each county shall be exempt, and then this is on page 2, line 8, after the word use. A property owner shall only claim one exemption for all business property consolidated under an EIN or social security number if using sole proprietorship. So if you feel like we've kind of cleaned up that concern about someone filing multiple reports with multiple names under multiple LLCs, I would ask for your aye vote on this amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Any member for the first time, Representative Filer, for your first time.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. On and against this amendment, for the simple fact that every county assesses their own entities that are within that county. Now, there is some small business owners out there that might operate in, say, Laramie County and maybe Albany County. But when we look at this to say that they can only use under the employer identification or social security number, they can only claim one exemption for all businesses, but maybe that business does multiple different things. So, and in different counties. So I think, I understand the bringer of this amendment to, try to scale that back. But, a small business owner, any one of us could own multiple small businesses. Not all of them might be profitable, some might be profitable, but at the end of the day, we are starting something that's hoping to grow the economy in whatever county or district you're in. So to take this down to one exemption, I think is not a good direction. I think if you operate a small excavating company in Laramie County, you might be able to have an exemption there, but you also maybe run an electrical company in Laramie, right? So then you can get an exemption on that because you can own multiple small companies. So on and against this, folks, I think we just, if you're operating within that county, you get one exemption. And just keep it that way. Thanks, folks.
Representative Lucas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Body, I encourage you to resist this amendment, and I have a clarification. The current law exempts the first $2,400 of personal property, and this act by the Revenue Committee increases that to $50,000. It hasn't been changed yet, although we do encourage that. Just some numbers for you. The personal property tax on $2,400 would afford a business of any size $228 in tax cuts. At 50,000, that's $4,750. I suggest that if you own a small business, a construction business, for example, you'll spend far more than that on your first skid steer, and you may own businesses in more than one county, and currently that is allowed. It's not illegal, and somehow we haven't figured out that people are trying to pull a fast one on the state. I talked to the folks in the department that handles our revenue, and they were fine with the way that it's being reported. They have no concerns. They do audit, and they have no concerns on that. So I do encourage you to resist this amendment.
Representative Brown, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this is something new to my bailiwick. Started my own little small business back in July last year, and I got this little note in the mail from our county assessor. It said, "Hey, you owe us more money." I went, "Oh crap, I didn't realize that." And so as I'm reading this particular amendment, while I understand what we're trying to accomplish with this, in my particular situation, I have 2 EINs. Both those EINs are LLCs. They both run underneath my social security number. So the way that this amendment is written is it says "or." And so if I decide that I want to still game the system, I technically could. Because all I would actually have to do is just go file an EIN and get a new EIN every single day. I can go create a new one and get a new EIN submitted to me by the IRS every single day, and I can still game the system if I wanted to. I actually looked at my seatmate and said, dang, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think about gaming the system? That's not just the way I'm wired, right? But I appreciate the intent of this. But what I will also tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is the small businesses that we're talking about here, I didn't become a millionaire starting a small business, and I certainly am not trying to make the county rich by paying more taxes. I certainly understand the intent of this, of trying to say, hey, look, we don't want to game the system, and we don't want people gaming the system. But as the other good representative from Laramie County just stated, we're in a position of $200 and these small businesses' checkbooks that they get to keep. It's not a significant amount of money that's going back. So while I appreciate the intent of this, I still think the gamesmanship can be done. And so I think that I wish we would have thought of this and maybe tried this in second reading a little bit more and tried to do this. But I don't think I'm comfortable with the language of this amendment, only for that reason, is I can still have gamesmanship by just creating an EIN and filing it underneath that. So on and against this amendment, only for that reason. I appreciate the good work that this representative and the chairman of the Revenue Committee were trying to do on this, but I still think we have a loophole there that could be exploited. So on and against.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Bratton for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am also on and against. The reality is that anybody with a Schedule F can hit $50,000 with a tractor pretty quickly, which we do have to pay business or personal property tax on. So if you also have another business on a Schedule C that has equipment, then you can't use the exemption there. So again, do you think that you should be able to take an exemption for each of the businesses? I have multiple businesses, and I would say yes, that I should be able to take that exemption for each one. Each separate business I own is a tax-paying entity. It generates jobs and is paid taxes, some of them on the purchase of that equipment. So on and against, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative for their first time. Any others? First time? Seeing none, going to the second time. Representative Filer for your second time, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And I think with this, I'm trying to stand up for the very last person is a sole proprietorship. Most of your small businesses start out as a sole proprietorship because a lot of times you don't have investors or anything like that. So if you want to start your own little landscaping company or maybe even hit golf balls around inside of a building, sometimes that's a sole proprietorship. And you know, so if you own that and it grows into an LLC or something like that where it ends up getting an EIN number, but hey, you know, over here's a good idea too, where we might want to move over here and have a mechanic shop, right? But most likely, that's going to be a sole proprietorship and move its way up into the AIN statuses and other stuff like that. So, I think anybody can own multiple businesses, but they're all different entities. And they might operate in a lot of different counties. So let's not, just say because you own one and you get an exemption over here, tough luck on the rest of your adventures. I don't think that's a good idea. So on and against.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lucas, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a clarification note. I don't know if any of y'all have applied for EINs online. You can, and it's very convenient and easy. And the IRS will shut you down in a moment if they don't understand exactly something. You cannot get an EIN from your email address, your phone number, and your mailing address every day. They're on to you on that kind of thing. So you have to really work hard to gain that piece of getting up multiple EINs. Please resist this amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? Representative Bratton and Brown. Landon, who can speak on it? Not going to? Okay, back to the bringer. Representative Sherwood, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, body, for that great conversation. Again, it took us multiple days. We had multiple versions of this, amendment to try to get it right, because currently in statute, this loophole doesn't prevent against fraud. And as illustrated on the mic today, this amendment probably also doesn't prevent against fraud. So again, it's the intention, and really maybe the intention is to put a little seed of doubt in your mind about this bill and whether or not it's ready. So vote aye, vote nay. The loophole still exists either way.
That was almost poetic right there. Members, you're being asked to vote on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 48. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration, number 2, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, great conversation. I move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 48. I ask for your favorable consideration. So as currently was pointed out, that the exemption as it exists today without this bill is $2,400. And in speaking to the department that oversees our revenue, really the intent of that and that initial idea was to benefit the smallest of our businesses, our Main Street businesses. This was our yoga studios. This is our sole realtor who have a mat or have a computer, have very little in business assets. So this $2,400 benefited those businesses. Still had the self-reporting. Right now, the amendment is so the bill is to change it to 50. My amendment is a suggestion for your consideration to half that amount, so $25,000. At the 50, that is almost a 2,000% increase from where we are today. At half of that, it's over a 900% increase, so still quite a generous jump. I very much am a fan of our small businesses. And so I think the intent of the law as it exists today supports our small mom and pops. What I'm not a fan of is giving additional tax breaks to big corporations like chain grocery stores that some of us may refer to as Wally World. I want to make sure that we're setting up our tax code to benefit our small mom and pops who are investing in our communities, who are creating local jobs. I don't want to unintendedly benefit our big out-of-state corporations who don't need this, absolutely do not need this break. So for your consideration, that is my amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Pendergraft, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment. I have 2 of the smallest businesses you'll ever see. However, each one of them has somewhere around $35,000 to $50,000 in equipment. $25,000 is not much.
Representative Filer, first time, please.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. on and against, I believe the amount of $50,000, as you guys will see coming up, I think isn't even enough. If we look at inflation, let's just take the last 20 years. I started a landscaping company years ago, and so we're talking 13, 14 years ago, that one used piece of equipment, and I was a sole proprietor then with this. It was a little skid steer. Back then, cost me almost $70,000. If we look at a price of a new skid today, you're anywhere from 90 to 105,000 depending on your options, okay? Or if you want to get tracks or wheels or whatever it might be in order to do your job. So if we think of somebody that's just starting a small excavating company, 50,000 is just barely even a drop in the bucket, honestly, on what they actually have to invest in order to operate business. So when we look at wanting to support small business, I think this is a good start at the 50,000. I think it needs to be a little bit more. We'll see that here in a little bit. But at the end of the day, 25,000 in some businesses don't even provide the IT services that you need to even run your small business. So when we look at inflation rates and how they've gone up, 25,000 is actually a very, very small investment when it comes to actually operating and trying to get a small business up and running. So on and against.
Representative Lucas, for your first time, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I offer this information body. Yes, it is possibly true that very large businesses are going to enjoy a tax break. They also pay a lot of taxes too. And I think that when we look at really who we're intending to help are the small business owners. $2,400 in 1997 or 1998 when this bill was originally enacted was probably quite a big savings. But right now, it's really not getting you very far on a piece of equipment. If you have a small plastic cutting business that you run out of your garage, your equipment can cost you $50,000. And so it's really not going to help you much to be able to save $2,400, so obviously we must raise that. $50,000 is not that far of a stretch. Resist this amendment, please.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Brown, your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So again, just speaking as kind of the new business owner here, this is something that was brand new to me, ladies and gentlemen, and it's actually something that kind of, once I got that letter in the mail this year, I actually got a call from the county assessor first, and they said, hey, we were out surveying some areas around here and we noticed you're a new business. You're going to pay us more taxes. And I went, okay, fantastic. So wasn't aware of this, right? So kind of give you an idea of what this looks like. It started a few years ago. This exemption started a few years ago on what we call the de minimis discussion. And that de minimis, what that discussion centered around was a good former senator and I and a few others kind of worked on this process, and we said, hey, look, it's actually costing us more to administer this program at the government level than it is for the amount of taxes we're getting in here. And we found that de minimis line at about $2,400. That doesn't mean that at $2,401 we started making money as a government because of that. That was kind of the breaking point. So this discussion continued. And it has continued and continued, and it continued in the Revenue Committee. But from my point of view, as we just heard, I own a little golf simulator business. Well, one little simulator is $27,000. I own two of those. So I'm going to get $25,000 of the $27,000 off of one of those. Okay, that's nice. I appreciate that. But then I have to pay sales tax on those when I ordered those. Well, here in Laramie County, that same tax rate was 6%. I also pay property tax on the building when I pay taxes on that building. This is just an additional property tax on the equipment that you have. And what was really interesting is I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything wrong. So I went to my assessor and I said, what do I actually need to include? Do I need to include things like the carpeting because I changed out from carpet to turf? And they said, yep, you need to change that. I said, what about like my projectors? What about the computers? Yep, every single thing that you can think of. There's literally a line on this that says nothing is too small. That is the portion that I get a little concerned about. When you say nothing is too small, but we start adding up. Well, if there's nothing too small, it doesn't take too long to get to $25,000. It certainly doesn't take long to get to 50. And I just had a discussion on another amendment here in the future about, maybe it should have been 100,000. You're not taxed at 6%. You're not taxed at 10% or anything like this. It's your property tax rate that's going to hit this. So it's not a significant amount of money. But on the other side of things, if we're trying to keep small businesses afloat, and they are the backbone of what most of our communities are, we don't have a lot of these big box chain retailers that are the ones that are actually keeping our businesses or our communities afloat. 25,000 seems like it really reduces that pretty quickly. And so I think about, there's a little store down here in center downtown Cheyenne that does kitchen cooking, stuff like that. And when I sit there and I think about how much this individual is probably going to save on this and be able to put some of that money back in, because I will also tell you that's one thing that you'll learn in business economics, is those dollars that go into a small business are recycled in a community 6 times. That same business owner is going to go find another small business owner, is going to find another small business owner, is going to find another small business owner. When you help those small business owners keep that money in those communities, it's going to be recycled 6 times. The big box stores, it's like less than 1 time. So we're not really talking about a major tax break here for major corporations. You are talking about that mom and pop shop that is down the street from you and your family members that may or may not own these businesses as well. So I'm in favor of the 50. Personal side of things, sure, I'd love more, but I also recognize that I stood up here and argued for property tax cuts on against that, making sure that we fund our local government. So got to make sure that we're balancing this, right? Got to be fair. But I think taking this down to 25,000, yeah, the math makes it seem scary when you say it's a 1,000-time percentage increase. But at the end of the day, it's a couple $100. I think my county commissioners are going to hate me for this, but I think we can handle it.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Larson, JT, your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm on and against the amendment, similar to what the last speaker just said. I think this is an appropriate amount. I do want to raise the point, though, that I just went to the CPI calculator and did 1997 to 2025 and punched in $2,400 and goes up to $4,700. So, we are going beyond inflation on this adjustment, which I think is fine. We want to support our local businesses. So I'll be on and against the amendment, but just kind of want to paint that picture for you so you have a better idea of what we're voting on. So thanks.
Representative Schmidt, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to applaud my fellow representative that mentioned the cost of equipment and how it's jumped recently. So thank you for that. I know what that's like when you buy backhoes and track hoes and forklifts and workover rigs and swab rigs. So this is a bill that I'm very interested in, and I'm really looking forward to the next amendment. But what I'd like to say is, with the good bringer, that I don't want us to think about, or would encourage us not to think about worrying about what a big corporation may get. Hold this bill back because of that, when we've got a handful of those big businesses, but we've got a multitude of small businesses out there that could really benefit from this. So let's not lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any others for their first time? First time on the amendment. Second time? Speak second time. Representative Pendergraft, for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just wanted to kind of describe briefly how I started a little contracting business, doing a little handyman stuff. I had some money that I had earned, but I paid income tax on that. And I went down to the local hardware store and I started buying tools, and I paid sales taxes on them. And then any money that I made with those tools. I paid income tax on that. And then they came and told me I had to pay another tax on every tool that I had and everything that I used, including the truck, which, by the way, every time I filled it up, I paid taxes on that. Every time I put a license plate, I put taxes. You get where I'm going. When's enough? As for the level, the amount, I too am looking forward to the next one. As I tell you, I've got a little sound business, a recording studio. And I've got over $10,000 just in cables. $50,000 is nothing.
Any other members for their second time? Second time, seeing none, back to the bringer. Representative Sherwood, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and body. That was helpful, and I agreed with almost everything that was said at the mic. It just illustrates that this is a more complex policy discussion than maybe that we were anticipating. On one hand, do we create a number that keeps up with inflation? Thank you for that calculation. Do we sort of gradually stair step into this, or do we do away with it altogether? Is the policy maybe why are we trying to patch this when maybe it doesn't need to be on the books or in a different form? I do think this would make a great interim topic. I think I almost brought an amendment to backfill because I think one thing that maybe we haven't looked at is the fiscal note. So it's not as large as the bills we discussed yesterday, but for a 2-year period, it has an $8.2 million impact to our schools and a $5 million impact to local services, right? So pro small business all the way, hometown, homegrown jobs are my favorite, but there is an impact to services with this. Take that into consideration. My amendment would lower that impact, cut that impact in half. The other thing to consider is how many of your small businesses have come to you and asked for this? Are we getting messages, emails? Okay, right? So maybe more of that voice needs to be heard because I haven't heard from any of my businesses on this issue that they're asking for this. So I think that the policy as is problematic, and it's worth our time to maybe put pause, work on it in the interim, and come up with a better solution. Thank you.
Body, you are voting on third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 48. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for our consideration, number 3. Representative Filer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third amendment, reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 48. You talk when you come up here, mess me up, bro. Okay. Anyways, folks, what this does is it takes it from the $50,000 to $75,000. And with those other concerns that we heard about, our counties losing money with the property tax cuts and all these different things, I totally understand that. But also there was a representative from my county who made a great point that every dollar that's thrown out there gets turned around 6 times from a small business. If we think about that, under property taxes, our counties don't get as much money from property tax, but they get more from consumption tax. So they're actually, we're gonna gain more up on the consumption tax side than we ever would the property tax. Because people actually go out and buy it. As we keep turning that dollar, each time it's getting taxed at the consumption tax rate. But another reason why I'm bringing this to 75 is the same arguments that we have already had. How much equipment costs, how much a projector might cost, or how much cables might cost, or even how much it costs for somebody that wants to start a little, podcast type thing in their house, right? But at the end of the day, I'd say 90+% of small businesses starts out as a sole proprietor. It's usually by yourself. It's your idea. You move forward. As you grow, you might be able to get investors and things like that to help you with your business. But until then, you're on your own. So to say that this helps large companies, oh no. This helps small. I could show you guys invoices just from me when I first started one of my companies 3 years ago. The $75,000 it's not even a drop in the bucket. And I've had to spend my whole life savings just to get things moving forward. And once I did that, of course, yes, investors came in, things like that, partnerships. But at first, I would have loved to have just a little bit of a break on this, just a little. I mean, we're talking $7,000 a year on average, probably, for every small business owner. So 7,000 times that by 6 into your community, a lot more money, you know? So that dollar just keeps turning and turning and turning. So I do feel for our counties. I don't want to cut them too much shorter than we kind of, this body and the other body already has. But at the end of the day, this is an economic driver. And as a small business that might be 30 miles south of here, might be like, hey, you know, Laramie County in Wyoming, this might be the place to go because this is the place that started up because I know I'm going to save a certain amount of money, 7,000 or whatever it is a year on that exemption. So this is, I think this is a small business driver to get more small businesses started up, and we shouldn't have a handle on them. We kind of, maybe the government's always raining on us as small business owners, but maybe sometimes we need to let go of them reins a little bit, let them progress and go forward. So on and against this, folks, and on and for this. That was that was rough. That was rough. But on and for this, and just think, 75,000 still doesn't even really help that person that just wants to start a little landscaping company. It doesn't do. So this just a little bit, guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lucas, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some more numbers for you, because I like those things. 1997 skid steer cost between $11,000 and $19,700. In 2025, depending on the options on that baby, you can spend $43,500 up to $90,000. This exemption would apply to the first $75,000, which is $7,125. It doesn't apply to every skid steer you buy, but just that first one maybe to get you started. I think that this is something that a small business owner could really benefit from. I don't think that we're giving them anything undue because they're still going to pay their 9.5% property tax on all the rest of their property, right down to the desks that they own. And they also pay sales tax, I bet you, on a whole lot of this stuff when they buy it too. So I'm in favor of this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Yin, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So members, the point of the de minimis personal property tax exemption and personal property tax language before this bill, the intent of it was our assessors were spending more money on administrative costs than they were making in the tax bill that they were sending out, right? So you send out a tax bill for a tax bill of like $1.50 or something nonsensical. Okay, fix it. We'll fix it with this exemption. I think the feeling in the room is that we just want to get rid of the personal property tax altogether. I'm actually for that. I am for that. But I think that's a consideration that we need to take in whole when we talk about our local property taxes and where those go. Because while it's not a majority of our local district's taxes, their revenues, it's still a significant amount that we need to have that conversation over. To start bumping the exemption number up higher, I think is creating another tax revenue shortfall that we are continuing with our current process within these two chambers, where we're gonna hit a wall at some point. So this is just kind of another slice of the pie that we're just chipping away at. And good. I think it's good that we're giving it back to our small businesses, but I think that if we're going to continue down this road, we need to really have a holistic conversation that I wish we could have had in the bill that one of my good colleagues from my county had brought forward. But I think upping the exemption at this time is probably not the right way to go. And with the exemption, you're still gonna get a couple of these companies, especially the companies that are right at that 75K mark. You're still gonna get those tax bills where they're gonna be sending out a tax bill for $1 if they're right at 75, 80,000. So they get the 75,000 exemption. They're paying taxes on a couple $1,000. it's going to end up being a small tax bill anyway. So no matter what, this bill isn't even going to solve that problem. What it is going to do is going to cut revenue from our local districts or special districts or counties or municipalities. But, you know, it's going to mean that I'm not going to have a tax bill in some of the counties that I operate in, which is, you know, good for me, but maybe not good for the county that I operate in. So I want to have a broader conversation about these bills. But with this amendment, I think at this time I'm going to resist it. But I do hope that you keep it in mind that this is one more slice that we're taking out when we go home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minority Floor Leader Yen. Representative Tarver, Vice Chair Tarver, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I would suggest not resisting. I think this is a small little step forward, and I do like the previous representative's idea. We should work on getting rid of personal property tax altogether, but let's chop this tree down one whack at a time. Thanks.
Representative Kelly, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendments, we have a philosophical difference here. This is not us giving more of our money to small businesses. It's confiscating less money from small businesses. The other side of this is, for those who are thinking that large corporations are going to have some big windfall, those self-checkout machines, they'll hit the 75,000 in 3 to 4 machines maybe, and still be paying huge tax bills. So this is really targeted to our small businesses.
Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. I just had two things that I wanted to say. One, businesses don't really pay taxes. Yeah, they fill out the forms and they send in money, but they pass that on to all of their clients. If they don't, they're not going to make it. So bear that in mind, that any tax we put on there is actually a tax on the people. But beyond that, I just wanted to say a word about conflict. I've heard a couple people say, should I vote conflict? Conflict, as we all know, is if there's a very small group of people that are going to benefit, and you happen to be one of those people, then you should probably vote conflict. But I look around this room, and I think most of the people that I'm looking at own at least one small business. Some of you, like myself, own several. And that is, I guess I'd just say in your own mind, if you're sitting there thinking, should I vote conflict or not? As far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to worry about it.
Representative Davis, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess my question out here is, what's the definition of a small business? I mean, we're talking $75,000 in tools and toys and or material that you use to operate your business. You know, that's depending on where you're at in your business life. You know, what is the definition of small business? Is it off the net revenue, or what are we looking at here? You know, so maybe we need to, before we jump these, continue to roll this ball up. I mean, heck yeah, I want a couple $100,000 in personal property tax write-off. But am I a small business? That's the question. What are we trying to address here? And to me, you know, the 50 is probably more than enough, you know. But anyway, that's what's coming into my mind here.
Representative Larson, Lloyd, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the last speaker, when we started requiring, when the Fed started requiring paying health insurance to employees, you had to do that for any, if you had 50 employees or more. If you had 50 employees or less, you were considered a small business. So I don't know how big is big or how small is small, but if you want a definition, that's one that's out there.
Representative Geringer, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to point out that this is for all businesses. It just happens to have a larger impact on small businesses. And so regardless of what that definition is, we're talking about a minimal impact to large corporations that have a lot of business property, related property, and the small businesses. It's difficult to get a business started. It really is. And so when we're looking at trying to encourage, small business really is the backbone of our economy. We have so many different people, as one of the previous speakers pointed out, so many people even in this own body that have various small businesses. And you understand what the difficulty is. And so if we're updating an out of date limit on this, then let's go ahead and up it. And then let's continue the conversation about what that should really look like, whether there should be or shouldn't be any sort of limit on that, and tax in general on it. But at this point, it's just kind of throwing a bone to to update those outdated standards, and I would be on and for this amendment.
Any other representatives for the first time? Representative Bratton, first time.
Thank you. I think that I like the amendment. I think that it is a timely update. I think it will eliminate, save some of those filers by raising it to $75,000. And, this tax, I mean, you're taxing the producers, forcing them to basically pay rent on their own equipment that allows them to be productive, to produce and to drive the economy. I think it's a good amendment. On and for.
Any other members for their first time? First time. Representative Stivar, first time.
First for a second.
First, second. Any other members? First time. Is that it? Okay, second time. Any members want to speak on the issue second time? I've got Lucas, Yen, Tarver, Kelly, Pendergraft, Davis, Larson, Lloyd, Geringer, Bratton, and Stivar. Any of those members want to speak a second time? None? Back to the bringer, Representative Filer. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And I get some of those other concerns, like what may or may not be a small business. But what the representative from my county just said, yeah, it's going to affect all businesses across the board. And I just got done texting one of my good friends who owns he does actually own a nice, larger excavation company here in the capital city. And he started this company about 15 years ago. And I asked him what this would do for him. And he says, you know what, it'd be very small for my company now because they're pretty large. He says, but boy, I would have loved to have that 15 years ago. He said that could help me actually put more money towards some extra equipment. I could have maybe even built my business faster, hired more people, and all those types of things. So when we look at this, don't look at it as a decrease to our counties or anything like that. Look at this as an investment back into our community, that where these companies can start hiring more people, we get more, the money just keeps flowing at that point. So, I would just look at it that way, folks. Small businesses are tough. I've owned quite a few of them, and without a break. I didn't get many breaks, right? But boy, I'd sure love to have our kids start a business and have maybe just that little bit of a break. Just give them a little bit of a leg up. So, on for this amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Members, you are voting on third reading amendment number 3 to Senate File 48. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Oh, that was sad. But third reading amendment 3 has been adopted, Senate File 48. And I believe we have run out of amendments on that particular piece of legislation. So with that in mind, Senate File 48 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Ellerman. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. Bratton. Brown Gary. Brown Landon. Byron. Campbell Elisa. Campbell Elisa. Campbell Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Filer. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Repeat. Posey. Provenza. Riggins excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Yin, no to aye. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 56 aye, 4 no, 2 excused.
Senate File 48, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 48 has passed the House. Representative Worf, did you have something you'd like to announce, or? Oh, well, you'd had to been in on the first time. I didn't have you down on the first time or second time, so. All right, next bill for our consideration, Senate File 33.
Senate File 33, sponsored by Transportation, non-citizen driver's license and ID card revisions, an act relating to motor vehicles being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We don't have any amendments, so. Okay, so Senate File 33, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, will please call the roll.
Allemand. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Brady. Bratton. Brown Gary. Brown Landon. Byron. Campbell Elisa. Excused Campbell Kevin. Chestick. Clouston. Connolly. Davis. Eklund. Erickson. Feiler. Repeat. Geringer. Guggenmoss. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Heft. Jarvis. Johnson. Kelly. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Lean. Locke. Lucas. McCann. Nicholas. Ottman. Pendergraft. Posey. Provenza. Riggins excused. Rodriguez Williams. Schmid. Sherwood. Singh. Smith. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Thayer. Washut. Wasserberger. Webb. Weber. Worf. Williams. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote closed. 53 aye, 7 no, 2 excused.
Senate File 33, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 33 has passed the House. Next Senate file for our consideration will be Senate File 63.
Senate File 63, sponsored by Senator Crago. State Lands Fencing 2, an act relating to state lands being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. Representative Nicholas. Oh, a corrected copy? Okay, we'll stand at ease briefly while we get that straightened out. We'll be watching your computers and refreshing them. It's a great time to be refreshing right now. And here we go. Representative Nicholas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring third reading amendments 1 through 5 to the state lands fencing bill, which Senate File 63, and ask for your favorable consideration. Before I walk through these amendments, I just want to bring in a little background and some understanding of what this does and what these amendments are trying to do. So because I think there's some repercussions in the bill as it's currently drafted that are unanticipated, both for the lessees of state lands and for the state of Wyoming. And so really what I'm trying to do is not change the bill, but just give it more parameters and so that we can apply it in a reasonable way to effectuate what this bill is trying to do. Because this bill essentially is trying to, as the state of Wyoming, be a good neighbor to your adjacent landowner when a fence goes up. And I think that's a good thing. So let's just talk a little bit, some background information about this. So Wyoming has roughly 3.4 million acres of leasable ground in the state of Wyoming. 3.4 million acres. 98% of that 3.4 million acres are leased for ag grazing purposes. Roughly 68,000 is unleased. And it's unleased for particular reasons. It's state lands, but it could be a state park, could be a reservoir, could be certain other things. It could be really mountainous property that's not susceptible really for a grazing lease. But everything that they can lease, they try to lease. Wyoming is also owned 50% by the federal government. So they own a lot more property. The feds own a heck of a lot more property than the state does, right? And as a result of that, a large percentage of the state lands that we have, that 3.4 million acres, are adjacent to federal lands. And so we have two different issues that this, what we need to address. We need to address boundary fences with private property owners, and we need to address boundary fences with the federal landowners. Why? Because in Wyoming, we have a fence-out policy for private ranch properties. That's just our property of the state. That means if you want to have cattle on your property, you fence out, right? To prevent animals from coming onto your property. The state of Wyoming does not have a fence-out policy. The federal government does not have a fence-out policy. What they say is, if you, on state ground, if an animal comes onto the state property and you allow that animal to cross there, that's trespass. And we have a statute, 36-9-116. That statute was adopted in 1890, basically untouched for 135 years, right? And it's worked well until today, apparently. So what's the difference? If the federal government wants to build a fence, a boundary fence, which they don't, by the way, unless they have to, then how does that become an issue between the state or the lessee of the state lease and the feds? We don't want to give a quiver to the federal government to force us to pay for a federal government's fence. We'd love them, if they're going to build it, fine, but they can now force us to build a fence. So we have 4,074 agricultural leases for grazing in the state of Wyoming. They typically, almost all of them for 10 years. They renew 10% of those every year, right? So it takes 10 years if you want to change a lease to catch up to all the leases, to catch the impact of what this bill does, unless we address it in the bill or allow OSLI to correct that issue by rule and regulation. Because what this bill does says, if you are a lessee on a state property and your adjoining landowner builds a fence, that lessee, who, and let's say I entered that lease 5 years ago, has to pay for that half of that boundary fence. Well, that wasn't written into the lease with the state lessee, and so all of a sudden, he's got another burden, which if he doesn't want to pay for it, the cost of fence right now is roughly anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 per mile. If it's a section, that's a lot. That could be 6 miles, right? That could be $150,000 for a fence for property you're leasing for probably $5 an AUM. So it makes absolutely no sense because, in other words, it'll chase those lessees who are found in that situation off of the state lease because they won't be able to afford the fence. And what's interesting about this also is, under this, the way it's currently drafted, you can come in, build the fence, and then send the bill to the lessee or to the state after it's done, which means that you don't get to decide where the fence is going to go, you don't get to decide what the fence is going to look like, and you don't get to decide or review whether or not they're using, what gauge of wire they're using, what type of fence posts they're using, what kind of brace posts they're using. All of those things which can, that if you want a boundary fence on state property, I would think we would want to know. We would like to have at least the opportunity to say, well, let's improve that. Let's do better wire, or we can buy it cheaper here, or we'll help you, or we'll put it in, because we can do it cheaper than the cost that you have. So all of these things, the more you go down this rabbit hole, the more you realize that we ought to do this in a structured way so we know about and can think about how this maps out. And so what I've got is kind of I broke it down into like 5 different pieces. And so we can talk about each one of those and whether it's a good idea or bad idea on how we interact with this. So if you go to the corrected amendment number 1, well, first let's just go to the bill itself, because it's important to know exactly what the bill says. So if you are a landowner, and it doesn't describe what a landowner is, so that could be the federal government, it could be a Forest Service, it could be BLM, or it could be a private party. And you hold a lease adjacent to federal lands, you can fence it off, and the state or the lessee of the state has to pay 1/2 of the actual cost of that partition fence, period. So it says have to. You have to do it no matter what the cost was. And you heard the testimony from our good speaker several days ago that there are places where to put in a boundary fence is going to cost a lot because of the nature of the terrain. So it could be a $100,000 fence, and you don't have any choice, right? And your adjacent landowner hasn't talked to you about it. He just goes out and does it. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. This is the land of good neighbors, basically, or it should be, particularly the state, with whomever they're working with. So I would move Third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 63, and ask for your favorable consideration, ladies and gentlemen. So you have to get the corrected copy to know which one we're talking about here. The first thing this does, which is the bottom, is to provide money to the OSLI. So if someone is going to come build a boundary fence, they will be able to pay half of it. There needs to be money in the pot, right? And because we have lessees, if we have lessees on those property, they had no intention of building a fence because it wasn't there when you're leasing state ground. So it shouldn't be the responsibility of the lessee to pay for the fence. He's a short-term 10-year lessee at any rate. And so how's he going to get his money out of that fence unless he happens to want to keep that lease through a generation or two? And it's not in the lease. In the future, we can modify our leases and say, if a boundary fence is going to be constructed, you shall pay for it. But they don't say that right now. I went back and looked at our lease last night. It's not in there. And we have several of these leases. So the first thing that this does is it provides funds from the general fund, $1 million. How did I pick $1 million? Well, if a boundary fence costs, half of a boundary fence costs $3, that's on the high end of what our good folks from OSLI told us, $3 a foot. At $3 a foot, $1 million will construct 75 miles of fence line. That's all. So it's not a lot of fence line. We have anywhere between 500 to 1,000 miles of fence that could be subject to this. That's the estimate from our good friends at OSLI. So this is basically an initial deposit in order to cover current issues until the money runs out, right? But it's enough money to cover 75 miles of fence. The other thing that this does up front is it eliminates the idea that the lessee has to pay for the fence, because if you go back to the bill, page 2, beginning on lines 2 and 3, it says that if it's leased, the lessee of the state lease has to pay for that property. So this eliminates that. It puts the burden of paying for the boundary fence, one half of it, to OSLI, and then it provides money for it. So I'm happy to discuss any questions you have with amendment number 1.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Banks, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against. There really is no need for it. The office didn't come to the committee and say, hey, would you give us a whole bunch of money to this? Because now, in the committee, we'll clear up some misunderstandings here. The understanding and assumption is that we're going to have to fence all of these places. Well, that's not the case. Most places, we're talking about, where these state sections are, the adjoining landowner in most cases already has that lease. In places where they're not, a majority of the time they're already fenced. We're talking about a very small place where if it's a contested case, well, then they can come on, they can have this provision of a good neighbor and build a fence through there. That's the intentions of this bill. That's how this bill was worked when we worked through the interim. Now when it came back as this bill, that's what we're talking about here. I want to clear up the idea that we're going to break the state by doing this. That's not the case. That's why the provisions in this bill are the way they are. We're talking about 1-2% of the area. And most of the time, there can be and what we're trying to do is bring this to unity with the rest of the state of Wyoming. The feds, well, we can't make state law that determines that, but we can say with the state lands are going to be the same as with our private landowners. it's gonna be fence out. That's what we're addressing here. All of this other stuff is just, is not what's taking place. And so when the committee worked this with the office, when the office was there testifying, none of this came into place. So I urge you to defeat this amendment. It's not needed. Keep the bill clean going forward, and we'll continue to be good neighbors by this legislation. Thank you.
Any other members for their first time? First time? Representative Davis, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, the last presenter down there, the good representative from up and almost into the other state to the north of us, the 1 or 2% of the state lands that aren't currently leased are probably, that's a reason. They're probably inaccessible, remote, and as the good bringer of the amendment is saying, you know, they're not worth fencing. So that's why they're not, there's no intrinsic value to those lands. So to clear that up a little bit here, and as the good bringer of, or as the co-chairman from Ag says, if you're dealing with private land and state land, most generally, the state leases are within a private holding. On occasion, they're sitting out there, like for instance, I have a state lease that is surrounded by BLM ground. If I would like to fence that state lease, that is not an issue because the BLM will furnish half of the material and I can fence that with my half of the input there. And I think that's the intent of this bill, is if I own this state lease and he owns that private ground there, we come together, he'll build half of it, I'll build half of it, and it'll be done. And once, if I lose that state lease, then the improvements are capitalized back to me through depreciation, but there is intrinsic value still in my input into that. So I would be opposed to this amendment.
Thank you, Representative. Any other members? Representative Eklund, for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, so to try to fill in a few gaps, the reason we've come to this point is we had what I can think of is three different scenarios. One was just vacant lands. One of them was violations on leases in which they lost the lease. And the other one is new land purchased by the state, which would be treated like vacant lands. And it's very little of the property we have there. There are 3 or 4 of these disputes that I know of. Previous speaker talked about the capitalizing on what they build. Any permanent improvement you put on it will be paid for by the next leaseholder. And for whatever reasons, I'm not sure why State Lands, OSLI, didn't think they needed any money, but that's what they said during our testimony. And they seem to be fine with the bill as it was, so I'd resist the amendment as well.
Any other representatives for their first time? First time? Seeing none? Second time? Speaking to the amendment? Back to the bringer. Representative Nicholas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, ladies and gentlemen, State Lands didn't ask for money because they don't ask for money. That doesn't mean they didn't need the money. I mean, I had repeated conversations about this, and they say, if this goes into effect, we will need the money. That's simple. And how could they not need the money? Who's going to pay for it? Well, let's say the answer to that is either OSLI pays for it or the lessee. How many of you folks out there have leases with the state land? And look at your lease. Does it say that you have to, as a lessee, that you have to build a new boundary fence if someone else wants your adjacent landowner? I would respectfully say it does not. They're form leases. So let's talk about that, what is unfenced, that's 68,000 acres. The problem with this bill is now there's an incentive for all those folks who have boundaries with the state to be able to build fences where they don't exist. And so what we may see, and I think what part of what OSI fears is a land rush or a fence rush to start building fences because now the state has to pay for half of it. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two pieces of state lease on our family ranch where we could say, okay, now we want them to build this fence because they're all boundary fences. And there's no fence there. But it would actually help us. We get a fence for half price, and that would assist us in how we graze and manage the property. So you can move from one grass to another grass and save your grass and run more ahead. So it's a real risk, and I get the distinct impression that it hasn't really been discussed when this bill came out and hasn't moved through ag. So all in favor?
Members, you're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 63. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, this is roll, whoa, this is roll call. We do have an appropriation to this, so our chief clerk will call the roll.
Alaman? No. Andrew? No. Angelos? No. Banks? No. Bear? No. Brady? No. Bratton? No. Brown Gary? No. Brown Landon? No. Byron? No. Campbell Elisa? Excused Campbell Kevin? No. Chestick? Aye. Clouston? No. Connolly? No. Davis? No. Eklund? No. Erickson? Filer, Geringer, Guggenmoss, Harrelson, Harshman, Heiner, Heft, Jarvis. Repeat. Johnson, Kelly, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson JT, Lawley, Lean, Locke, Lucas, McCann, Nicholas, Ottman, Pendergraft, Posey, Provenza, Riggins excused, Rodriguez Williams, Schmid, Sherwood, Singh, Smith, Storer, Strock, Stivar, Tarver, Thayer, Washut, Wasserberger, Webb, Weber, Wharf, Williams, Winter, Wiley, Yin. Mr. Speaker, are there any changes? Schmid, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 8 aye, 51 no, 3 excused.
By your vote, you have chosen not to adopt third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 63. The next amendment for our consideration, amendment number 2, Representative Nicholas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 2 to House Senate File 63 and ask for your favorable consideration. So ladies and gentlemen, this was a really simple one. All this does is by landowner, it says private landowner. So we're adding the word private. What's the significance of this? The significance is it's fine to be building fences for adjacent private landowners. But we shouldn't be building fences for the federal government. So right now, the federal government and the state of Wyoming both have no fence out rules. They don't build fences. If you want it, you got to build it yourself. So in order for us, if we put and by the way, the feds have the rules. I found some of them, but not all of them. Basically, it says that if you want to build a fence along a boundary line for, say, National Forest Service or open range, it's your responsibility. And sometimes they provide material, sometimes they don't, but they don't have to. And if they go build it, they could charge us for our components even though that's not their typical practice, but it has been their practice in certain situations. So all this does is provide the benefit of this to landowners and make sure that we don't provide it to the federal government.
Thank you, Representative. Discussion. Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a problem with this amendment. I think it actually brings some clarity. If we want to say private landowners, I think that does kind of make it more in line of what we're trying to intend in this bill. So I would urge I vote on this one.
Representative Davis, your first time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm opposed against this because simply of the reason that I stated earlier, you know, if these state lands are surrounded by BLM or Forest Service, there would not be an avenue by removing landowners and specifically saying private landowners. So if we put private on here, I would like to fence my state section as a holding pasture when I'm gathering cattle, but I'm surrounded by BLM. Would that allow me to do that? Because it's lease to lease, and I just see there would be some problem in the interpretation of putting the word private in there. So I would be on and opposed to this.
Any other members? Second time, second. Back to the bringer.
Thank you. And for the good gentleman with the good first name, this wouldn't change any of that, right? So by putting private landowner in this bill wouldn't change the status quo if you're got a piece of property, private, and you're surrounded by BLM. It wouldn't affect it one way or the other. So on and in favor.
Members, you're voting on third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 63. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Amendment has been adopted. Third reading amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 3 to Senate Files. Actually, I think I threw away number 3.
I've got an engrossed and corrected copy.
I would withdraw number 3.
The bringer is asked to withdraw the amendment. Seeing no objection, is so ordered.
I meant to throw it away. So I would move third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 63 and ask for your favorable consideration, ladies and gentlemen. What this does is before, the bill as it currently reads means that the adjacent landowner can come build a fence and make you pay half the actual value of the fence, right? Well, it seems to me that we as a state have an obligation to make sure that we're paying a fair price for that fence and whatever that value is. And we ought to know how much it's going to cost because as the good speaker talked the other day, certain boundary fences could be quite expensive. And so it seems only practical that if someone's going to build a boundary fence, that they ought to give you notice that they're going to do it and to give you an estimate of how much it's going to cost so you can at least review it and know and say, okay, well, let's do it, let's build differently, let's do it more expensive, cheaper, or let's make sure that we're on the line and have it resurveyed before we get this thing underway. But you only have to do that if the cost is going to exceed $3 a foot. So what this says is the office shall not, actually, so what, that's actually the next amendment. I apologize, I've got this mixed up. What this amendment says is that any boundary fence that you're going to build cannot exceed $3 a foot. And if it does, you have to get approval of the actual cost of the fence before you build it. So currently, I mean, $3 a foot is a fairly expensive fence. So anything that's under that, you don't have to worry about it. But if you know it's going to be more expensive than $3 a foot, then you need to go and contact state lands and say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what's going to cost, and I'm just putting you on notice that this is what it's going to cost. So it's just, that's all. Just being a good neighbor. So on in favor.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Banks, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against, you know, when you have a state land section, you already have to get approval if you have improvements on the property. You already have to get the approval from the office. They're already going to be involved in this whole process anyways. You know, and there in section 2, we give them the authority to promulgate these rules. I don't see how this really aids the process of that, because that's already come to be. And again, if the Office of State Lands really was concerned about things like this, they would have brought them to us as a committee. They're good with the bill as it stands, and I think we should honor that as well. And there's already a process in place to do this. There's already the ability for them to promulgate rules. They're not going to be left out of the process, folks. They're going to be involved. They're going to be involved with the leasee. They're going to be involved with the cost. It's their responsibility, their authorities to manage these lands. They're going to be involved in it. So on and against.
Representative Davis, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, on and against this also because we have standards in the state of Wyoming in statute of what a approved fence is, you know, and that will address, is this going to be a wildlife friendly fence? Is it a fence to address cattle? Is it a fence to address sheep? I mean, there's a lot of different, but it's already in statute, and you know, the ability for the office, that office to look at this in rules would be the best place for this instead of putting this in a bill.
Representative Alaman, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. $3 a foot is a pretty good payment for a 5-wire fence, except what if we're going through Badlands? What if our dozer work and our blade work requires a whole lot more? If we're going across flat farm country, hey, I'll build a lot of fence for $3. But if we're going through the Pine Ridge Badlands, I won't touch it. Thank you.
Any other members for their first time? Seeing none, back to the bringer. Second time? Anybody? You all good? Back to the bringer. Representative Nicholas, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the comments because those comments just demonstrated what the problems are. Number one, if you are a adjacent property owner, you have no obligation to give notice that you're going to build a fence on a boundary line. And you're a separate property owner, so you don't have a state lease because you're trying to fence out a state lease. So what the good bringer of this bill just testified to earlier is inaccurate. It's not the situation that this is trying to fix. So if you're an adjacent landowner and you have a boundary fence, you can build it. You don't have to talk to your neighbor. You just don't. The way that this is currently written is now you send them a bill on whatever it costs. And like the last speaker just said, what if it's a really expensive fence? What if it's more than $3 a fence? Should the estate be obligated to pay more than $3 a fence? And all this says is, if you're going to build one and it's going to cost more than $3, you just got to give us notice. That's all this amendment does. So on and in favor.
Body, you're voting on third reading amendment number 4 to Senate File 63. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment for consideration, amendment number 5. Representative Nicholas, please.
Thank you. So amendment number 5, ladies and gentlemen, basically is just a notice for operation of this bill to go into effect, that the landowners, before a private landowner can construct a lawful partition fence, private landowner shall provide notice to the Office of State Lands of when and where he's going to construct it and how much it's going to cost. So it's just a notice, a good neighbor notice of building a fence. So on in favor.
Any members for their first time? Representative Banks, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, on and against, again, going back to the conversation of if you make improvements on that land, you have to have the approval of the office. That's already in statute. That's already the rules that are promulgated. They're going to work with these landowners because these happen under a contested case. And if there's a contested case, the office is already going to be highly aware of what's going on in the situation. They're going to be involved. They're going to know the lessee, the landowner that's adjacent. They're going to build a fence. That has to have approval of the Office of State Lands anyway. And for some further comfort, it lays out in the bill there in section 2, they have the ability to promulgate rules under this section, which falls into that authority of being able to do that. So on and against, let's defeat this one. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Davis, your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The good junior up here, he's exactly right. The paperwork is about 5 pages long and has to go before the office that administers this. And it's really quite a process in order to get the authority to construct a fence on this, around that state section. So it's pretty well vetted, so I would be on and opposed to this.
Any other members for their first time? First time? Seeing none, second time? Back to the bringer. Representative Nicholas, please.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments once again. This language is not meant for the lessee of the state lease. That, if you're going to build a fence, then you've got to go through the application process. This is to protect the state lands from the adjoining landowners building and how that fence is going to be constructed. It's not, we're not dealing with the lessees, and so it's apples and oranges. So this is protection for everybody. On in favor.
Members, you're voting on third reading amendment number 5 to Senate File 63. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Amendment has not been adopted. Okay, Senate File 63 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Allemand? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Brady? Bratton? Brown Gary? Brown Landon? Byron? Campbell Elisa? Excused, Campbell Kevin? Chestick? Plouston? Connolly? Davis? Eklund? Erickson? Feiler? Geringer? Guggenmoss? Haroldson? Harshman? Repeat. Heiner? Heft? Jarvis? Johnson? Kelly? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Excused? Lean? Locke? Lucas? McCann? Nicholas? Ottman? Pendergraft? Posey? Provenza? Riggins, excused. Rodriguez Williams? Schmid? Sherwood? Singh? Smith? Storr? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Thayer? Washut? Wasserberger? Webb? Weber? Wharf? Williams? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Mr. Speaker. Are there any changes? Allemand? No to aye. Bear? No to aye. Campbell Kevin? No to aye. Brown Landon? Aye to no. Brown Gary? No to aye. Singh? No to aye. Chestick? Aye to no. Andrew? No to aye. Guggenmoss? No to aye. Yin? No to aye. Geringer? No to aye. Further changes? Further changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 50 aye, 8 no, 4 excused.
Senate File 63, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 63 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 2:30 p.m.
Committee announcements. Any committee announcements? Vice Chair Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 2 appropriations will meet upstairs in our usual nest in about 10 minutes. We will be finishing our conversation on Senate File 145.
Representative Pendergraft, I think you had somebody trying to wave you down there.
Sorry.
We'll let them sort that out. Representative Byron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Committee number 6, TRW and Cultural Resources will meet in 15 minutes in room number 5 to discuss Senate File 2 and Senate File 164.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Brown, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs will meet in 10 minutes. Committee, 10 minutes this time around. We got 3 bills to hear this time around, and we're going to try to get them all done. Senate File 146, Senate File 102, and Senate File 26.
Thank you, Chairman. Vice Chairman Pendergraft,
We'll
please.
try that again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having received new information, we'll do this in the second hour. So let's do it in 50 minutes, 50 minutes.
Any other committee announcements? Is that it? All the committee announcements? Representative Singh, you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Privilege of the floor.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we have some guests here from the American Legislative Exchange Council, Gabriella Uli and Josh Meyer. There will be a reception available to all of us at the office tonight. And I just wanted to extend my warm welcome. Welcome to the state of Wyoming. You came here on a bright and sunny day, so please welcome her to the House.
Welcome to the House, Alec. So appreciate it. Thank you. Representative Davis,
Privilege of the floor, Mr. Speaker.
please proceed.
If you look to the north gallery, the previous Speaker of the House is sitting up there in his Scotch cap and incognito.
Well, there he is. Welcome, Mr. Speaker. Welcome to the House. That's kind of a different view, isn't it, Mr. Speaker? Welcome. Glad to have you, sir. Any other announcements? Representative Knapp, Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Just one more committee announcement for tomorrow. Corporations, your number 7 committee, will meet upon noon recess tomorrow at E005 to hear Senate File 51 engrossed, Senate File 52, Senate File 50 engrossed, and Senate File 59. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Any others? Is that it? Chairman, Representative, Majority Leader Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m., we will have our Minerals, Economic Development, and Banking Committee meeting. We will have 3 bills, Senate File 138, 17, and 154, if time allows.
Thank you, Representative. Any others? Seeing none, you have heard the motion, the majority floor. The House will stand in recess until 2, did you say 2 p.m.? 2:30, okay, 2:30.